Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. It's now 1 o'clock, at least in my computer, but we still have some people coming in, so we'll just wait a couple of minutes to let them enter. So at least here in Sweden, we have absolutely lovely weather and fantastic sunshine. So I'm very impressed that you are sitting indoors listening to a three-hour-long event about authoring tools. But maybe you are outdoors. It's one of the beauties of this online webinars. You can be wherever you like. So we will soon start the webinar. We are having live captions today, but we are still having people coming in. So maybe I should just wait until everyone is on board. We have seen people register from more than 35 different countries to this webinar. I think we cover most of the EU countries, or maybe all of them, plus Australia, North America, South America, South Africa, the Middle East, Asia. So very, very exciting to have people from really all over the world joining us today for this pre-GAD event on authoring tools. Very happy to see so many people, and still people are coming in. We are using live captions today, and also a very interesting functionality that we have started using in the last 6 months or so, where we can do automatic translations of the captions. So it's really exciting, and it works very well in different languages. So today we are offering automatically translated captions into German, French, Spanish, and Swedish. And my colleague Eva will post it in the chat if she didn't do it already. So you have separate links for these languages. And if you prefer the English captions, they are presented as closed captions in the Zoom function. Just click on the CC button in Zoom and you will have the closed captions. So still some people coming in, but I think we will start anyway, because now it's already a couple of minutes past 1 o'clock. So welcome everyone to this event on authoring tools. We are doing it as part of the GAD week that it has almost become. Is usually it used to be one day, but now so many different events are happening at the same time. So GAD has sort of grown to a full week, which we think is, of course, amazing. And we decided to have this event in connection to the Global Accessibility Awareness Day, because it's really something we want to make people aware about, which is the results of 2 very exciting research projects that we have been performing. My name is Susanna Lauren. I am the Research and Innovation Officer at Funka, a small consultancy in accessibility. And I'm joined today by a lot of fantastic speakers and panels, and I will present them shortly. So just some words about the agenda today. We are having an inspirational welcome speech by Bruce Lawson shortly. And then we will have the first panel, which is a policy panel, where we have end users and policymakers and representation from also web authors speaking about the role of authoring tools and the authoring tool industry. Then we will present the first of the 2 research projects that we are focusing on today, the cluster project, or the We for Authors cluster, which is the long name. And then we will have a short coffee break. And then we will present the second project called FEAT. And then we will end this with the industry panel. So there we have all the market leading players in the authoring tool market discussing together on the road ahead. So just some words to sort of set the scene of this whole thing. Why are we doing this? Why is authoring tools important, and what's really the point of all this? So what is the problem? What's the background of this? Well, we know that we now have, I don't know, but maybe 7 million or so websites in the EU that are supposed to comply with the Web Accessibility Directive in public sector and beyond. No one really knows exactly how many they are, but that's more or less the number that we can figure out. And if we say that maybe, I mean, it differs a lot, but in many public sector authorities, there are maybe 20, 50, or even a couple of hundred web authors who are publishing content times 7 million. Doesn't matter really which number you take, but it ends up with a lot of people. And at the same time, we know that approximately 50% of the accessibility problems that we find when we audit websites are created by the web authors. And that's not because the web authors are evil, but it's because many of them are not trained in accessibility. I would say the majority are not trained in accessibility, and quite a large proportion is not even trained like communication officers, because they really have another profession, but they are also publishing content online. And this means that all in all, to make all these millions of people do the right thing every time when they are publishing content, there's absolutely an enormous demand for training, which is of course good news because we are providing training. So it should be fantastic news for us and all the other colleagues in the industry providing accessibility training, but it just won't scale. This is never ever going to really fly if we are going to train new generations and new web authors all the time. This needs to be done in a more clever way. So that's kind of the background and the context for the research projects that we are presenting today. And I just wanted to sort of leave you with that so far, and we will also discuss more about it in the policy panel. But now I'm very, very happy to welcome today's first speaker, Bruce Lawson, who has accepted to be the inspirer and welcoming speaker for today. And I'll let you share your screen. So thank you for being with us today, and Bruce, and I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Susanna. Hello, everybody. If, by the way, I start to get watery-eyed, it's not because I'm overcome by emotion. It's because the trees in the United Kingdom are conspiring against me to give me hay fever. So apologies for that. It's my pleasure to be able to introduce you. Hopefully you can see my slides, maybe give the thumbs up if that's possible, Susanna. Excellent. So who am I? I was invited, I think, because I co-wrote these books, An Introduction to HTML5, and one of the first books about web accessibility. But that's not really why I'm here. The reason why I'm here is this is a younger and slimmer and more monochromatically coloured hair-headed version of me in the late 90s when I was head of primary in a school in Bangkok, Thailand. And I got sick and I couldn't use my left arm and then my left leg very well. So I popped along to the hospital, fashionably late because I'm a man and I don't go to the doctors often enough. And they diagnosed me with something called multiple sclerosis. So here's an attractive photograph of my brain. I'll leave you to inhale in wonderment. So when I got out of hospital and I taught myself to walk again, I didn't really know much about MS because they don't get it much in Thailand. They were kind enough to find some English language information, but that was Xeroxes from a medical textbook full of encouraging photographs of sliced up brains after autopsy. But across the road from my apartment in Bangkok was something called an internet cafe. And I went to something called Alta Vista, which was like Google, but black and white and powered by steam. And I typed in multiple sclerosis. And this website appeared, this attractive green website in Comic Sans, and it's called Julie's Joint, and it was made by a woman called Julie in the UK, and it was basically a forum for people all around the world, from New Zealand to Norway to Sweden to Canada to the UK and anywhere you can think of, full of people who had been diagnosed with MS and helping each other. And I thought to myself, wow, this is an amazing technology. People across the world, wherever they are, can all communicate with each other, can all express themselves without an intermediary, pretty much for free. I want some of this. So I got involved with the web, and I've been fighting for keeping the web open, free, accessible, not just for people with disabilities, but for people with low-powered devices, congested networks all over the world, and I continue to do so. So that's why I'm here. Now, you don't need me to tell you that 2020 has been something of a challenging year because of the COVID virus that you see on the screen with my brilliant infographic there. But where there's challenges, there's also opportunities. So the UN Conference on Trade and Development said the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated the shift towards a more digital world. Changes we make now will have lasting effects when the world economy starts up again. And in a survey of 12 different countries, they asked people, do you think that your current online habits will continue after the COVID pandemic is finished? And more than 50% of people said that they will shop more online even when the pandemic ends. And of course, this is an opportunity for us because people have realized now that when people really cannot physically go to stores, that if their websites are more usable, more accessible, and more performant, they're going to get better business. It's not all wine and roses, of course. A lot of COVID information sites themselves have proven to be inaccessible. Adrian Rosselli highlighted this, and our friends at Barrier Break are organizing a bug hunt for COVID accessibility bugs starting tomorrow. But it's an opportunity for us. There are reasons to be cheerful. WebAIM, Accessibility in Mind out of Utah, said that the number of detectable accessibility errors on the top 1 million home pages was 51 on average. That's an improvement from 60 just a year ago. And 97.4% of home pages had detectable WCAG2 failures, which of course is not great, but that's still a small improvement from 98.1 in 2020. There are other reasons to be cheerful too. The communities come together to reject the more obviously snake oil accessibility fixes. This is the overlay fact sheet, which is signed by more than 400 people like us, accessibility practitioners. I want to have a shout out to Carl Groves of Tenon, who was one of the organizers behind this fact sheet. But what's particularly good about this, I think, has been activism and community involvement by the people who are most directly affected by inaccessible or bad fixes for accessibility problems. This fact sheet has many case studies, if you want, or testimonials from people who have disabilities explaining why for them it's a problem. And this community engagement is also seen, for example, with the Royal National Institute for Blind People. They have a toolkit to help people challenge inaccessible websites, getting the people who are actually affected to challenge and demand better from the organizations providing services and goods. This is also a reason to be cheerful. Apple, who make, of course, lots of attractive devices, have always had a good record, excuse me, in the accessibility community. Apple believes accessibility is a human right and technology should be accessible. This is great, and they do a really good job of this. But one thing I've noticed in their, maybe you haven't read this, it's not particularly exciting, but in their 2021 annual meeting of shareholders, something really encouraging was announced. For the first time, from 2021 onwards, excuse me, the Apple's accessibility executive team will be bonused on environmental, social, and other values, including accessibility. Now, this isn't to say that everybody only does accessibility for monetary reasons, but I think it's a really great precedent that top people in organizations should be bonused or held accountable for the accessibility of their organizations. And perhaps this is only a symbolic thing, perhaps this is only a figurehead, but I noticed that after his inauguration, President Biden, the new whitehouse.gov site now has an accessibility statement linked on the footer of every page, which notably his predecessor's site, I forget the guy's name, but his predecessor's site didn't have this at all. And I think when the leader of the largest economy and one of the largest democracies in the world is encouraging accessibility and having a sign language translation of all the press conferences, that sends a strong message. I'm always minded of some words said by a friend of mine, Jamie Knight, who describes himself as an autistic developer and a senior research engineer at the BBC with partial speech. And Jamie said, no one comes to our sites disabled. They come with impairments. We disable them. And that resonates very strongly with me. But there's a lot that we can do, not just as site developers, but as developers of tools that people use to make this better. What we want is for where the fluffy bunny of content management goes, the Tweety bird of accessibility goes along by default for the ride. Now just take a look at this fluffy bunny and this bird. They were delicious, I can tell you. Absolutely fantastic with gravy last Sunday. If you take nothing home with you apart from this, I shall be happy. So today we're going to learn about what content management systems and authoring tools can do. And I want to reiterate what Susanna said. Most people are not evil. I am, but c'est la vie. But most people don't know how to do this. And the beauty of machines and systems is they can take that work off people and do it automatically. It should be impossible for anybody to be able to publish inaccessible content. Be realistic, demand the impossible was the 1968 Paris students' graffiti. Of course, the impossible can never be achieved, but by demanding it and attempting to strive for it, you're still going to get closer to the goal than you are today. That's what we're looking for. And to all of you here and all of the people who are going to present and show us some of the solutions they have arrived at, thank you. We salute you. Thank you for doing this. And as the 1968 Parisian student said, the struggle continues, and yet we strive. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bruce. That was lovely. I knew you would do a very good presentation. This was also very sort of positive, so I'm happy to hear that. Mostly when we talk about accessibility, it's kind of, we start with the problems, and so do we, because that's what we're usually paid for, pointing at problems. So that was very good. Thank you for setting the scene in a positive way. And I didn't give you sort of the long presentation. Your bio, short version of the bio is on the website for the agenda, so everyone can know what an amazing work you have done during the years. But I think another reason why I also invited you is because I knew you at the time when you were at Opera. So I think you have sort of a connection to the authoring tool world.
Absolutely.
Okay, but thank you.
Thank you.
Now, let's look at what the policy panel can do about this. So both of the projects that are going to be presented today were funded by the European Commission, but really on behalf of the European Parliament. And they are part of a special call focusing on authoring tools. So it seems like this particular part of the ecosystem of accessibility plays a key role, at least in the terms of the policymakers. So of course, when hundreds of thousands of public sector web authors and websites need to comply with the minimum requirements, there is a need for this training that we spoke about. So what can be done about this? How can we make sure that we do something positive about this. And I would like to welcome the first panelists to enter the scene or open your, start your video cameras. Hello, good to see you. So we have a very distinguished panel here with us today. I think I will start with Axel because you are waking up early in the morning. So I'm absolutely happy to have Axel Leblois with us today, a dear friend, my best sailing captain ever, and also a fantastic person with a long heritage, I would say, and legacy in the whole digital accessibility world, now leading G3ICT and IAAP, and based in Atlanta, or maybe now in Florida. I don't know. It's the time of the year when you're in Florida, probably. But anyway, in the US. So thank you for joining us this early morning, and really nice to have you here. We also have Catherine Norton from the European Disability Forum. Afternoon for you, but still very good to have you with us. Always a pleasure to have EDF on board. We do a lot of things together, obviously, and you're kind of my go-to person for understanding everything on how the policy works together with end user perspective in Europe. So thank you very much for joining us today. And then another good friend of mine, this is really just friends and family, I gather, but Roberto Scano from Italy. When we were doing most things together, you have a long CV, so I won't try to cover everything, but you have done a lot of things with standards from all sorts of perspectives. And also when I was doing the work for the transposition of the Web Accessibility Directive, you were then working in the WebEx group. And I think you are rejoining that group again. So you are somewhere in between all the agencies in Italy, I guess, but still very closely connected to the web accessibility world. So you are now today representing more of the web author perspective. So having the overview of what is the sort of the challenges from the web author position and many others. So I would like to start with Catherine. What role do you see that authoring tools or the industry of authoring tools and content management systems could have to increase web accessibility? What possibilities or potentials do you see there?
Thank you very much, Susanna, and thank you so much for the invitation to this panel. I'm looking forward to the whole event because indeed for us, authoring tools are extremely important in advancing web accessibility and access for everyone. So for EDF, I'm not the leading person in EDF for all things to do with accessibility, but I give you the general policy overview because, you know, for EDF accessibility, it's defined by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as a human right, but it's also an enabler of rights. So without accessibility, so many people in the population cannot be part of the online surge that we've seen, especially supercharged by COVID in the last year. So many parts of our lives that we never expected before are now online. They've gone forcibly online in the last year. So we're not just working online, we're working out online. We're not just Skyping with family, we're communicating with all of our colleagues and with the wider world, even with the local shops. And even for EDF, we have been doing our advocacy and mobilizing the disability rights community also online, engaging with policymakers online. Things that we didn't expect to be doing so much before. And user-generated content is more and more important on the web. We know this. People use authoring tools every day. Businesses are increasingly leveraging user-generated content to promote their products, as it's seen as a cost-effective and authentic way to grow brands' image and sales. And the public and voluntary sector are also doing the same thing. If authoring tools don't allow for producing accessible content, this means that clients can't engage with or produce the content that businesses expect to see, and they lose potential clients. So it's not good for customers and it's not good for businesses. I was trying to imagine this in the whole ecosystem, so the authoring tools as part of the whole picture of creating an accessible web. And I was thinking about imagining the accessible web for all as a pollution-free city, something that we aspire for because we all aspire for this these days as well. So we need to ensure lots of ingredients. We need accessible and affordable public transport, clear and safe paths, cycle routes, means of independent transport door to door for people with reduced mobility, emission-free cars, and sustainable energy production. And so in my image here, the authoring tools are the sustainable clean energy production. So if the web is our pollution-free city, it cannot work without that. So think of, if transport companies cannot ensure accessible stations, vehicles and information, if the tickets cannot be bought by all, and if the transport vehicles are run by polluting fuels, we will not achieve our goal. So we need this underpinning everything else. So for us, of course, it's fundamental. And I look forward to hearing more of the elements about it from the other panelists. Thank you, Susanna.
Okay, thank you. So Axel, from your more policy-oriented view and also having the global perspective of this, how do you see the authoring tools industry coming into play together with all the other ingredients that Catherine was talking about?
Well, first, Susanna, thank you for the invitation to this panel this morning. The first thing I would say is globally, there is a very clear obligation for all state parties to the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to provide accessible websites, both public websites and indirectly for all private websites. This obligation is defined very clearly in Article 9 of the CRPD. And furthermore, Article 9 in its second section has a paragraph H, which specifically says that accessibility should be taken into account at an early stage of development of anything. But that means for any kind of web development, if your authoring tool is not helping that process from the inception of your creation, then there is a big problem. And that's where the authoring tool industry could really help considerably the situation around the world. I mean, Bruce mentioned the Web AIM 1 million web page survey that was done now 2 years in a row. And as he mentioned, 97.4% of the home pages have WCAG error, meaning they are not compliant with the web accessibility guidelines of W3C. Now, how have states party to the CRPD done or made progress over the past few years? Well, when the CRPD was launched back in 2006, there were very few countries with any kind of policy for web accessibility. But the good news is today, there are more than 80 countries with web accessibility policies. But still, if you look at the 182 countries which are part of the CRPD, about 55% still have no policy whatsoever for web accessibility. And even among those who have a policy, only about a quarter, 25%, have any kind of minimum implementation or kind of partial implementation. So the distance is considerable. Now, the good news is we know it's possible to change that situation. And some of the obstacles we see at GIS-ICT and IAP is the extraordinary fragmentation of the industry of authoring tools. When we say authoring tool industry, it looks like it's a very well-defined thing. So for instance, let me make a comparison. When we looked at the accessibility of mobile devices, how many players are we dealing with around the world? Today you have Apple and Google controlling virtually the entire global market for operating system for mobile devices. And so they have been competing for accessibility features with great results. But in the authoring tool industry, you have a myriad of companies. You have, I don't know, I read the Funka survey, and just in Europe, for public website, you have a number of CMS being utilized, which is quite impressive. I forgot the number, but more than 80 or so. And that means that each of them has a very tiny market share. And what complicates the whole thing even further is that some of those major foundations for authoring tools are the CMS that are being used by organizations such as Drupal or WordPress, which aren't even companies. They are kind of galaxy of developers working together in an open source environment. How do you deal with that? And how do you regulate that? It's kind of a real difficult thing to think about. Now, I have a solution personally. I think that what we have to go towards is that the responsibility at the end is in the website publisher. You know, if you look at the built environment, who is responsible for inaccessible building? Well, that's the person who owns the building, and ultimately the person who owns the building should be very careful about who is the architect and who is the entrepreneur who does the construct the buildings. And then, you know, who is responsible for an inaccessible entrance? Is it the provider of material for the building, or is it the architect, or is it the owner who did not specify what to do? So that's where we are, I think, evolving towards. So we can discuss it later in the panel.
Yeah, thank you, Axel. So that is kind of where we ended up with the Web Accessibility Directive, to post the responsibility for the website owner. But there was a discussion actually during the transposition phase on adding the authoring tools as well. But that's not where we are right now. So Roberto, from the web author, the sort of practical hands-on part here, the reality on the ground, what do you say? How do you see the role of the authoring tool industry?
Yeah, I think that, thank you also to Catherine and Axel for their exposition, because make me think something. For example, when I start to work, the authoring tools was only like front page, Macromedia, Dreamweaver. These were the authoring tools. Sample tool for web developer, for web professional that develop websites, develop content, that sometimes have some experience about accessibility, but in a lot of cases, they don't know anything about accessibility. So we have a lot of websites that are not accessible. And then with the user-generated content, like Catherine said, every kind of website is authoring tools. Think to YouTube. When you publish video inside YouTube, YouTube is an authoring tools. Facebook, when you publish content inside Facebook, is an authoring tools. When you send an email by Gmail in a web application, is an authoring tools. Is a tool that create content. And then the CMS, like Axel said, I love to say also that Drupal, WordPress are great products that improve a lot of accessibility. But we have the dark side of these tools, that is that the developer that create templates, that create plugins, don't know anything about accessibility in a lot of cases. So we have people that say, okay, I can use WordPress or Drupal. I have a perfect accessible website, but isn't true. Because if they install a template that is not accessible, they break the accessibility characteristics of the product. The same thing if we use other kind of products outside of the web. I'm teaching a lot now in public administration in Italy about the correct generation of documents. You need to create documents that are accessible. In this case, for example, Microsoft gave more support for fix the issue inside the document than the open source products. I talk a lot with the friends that work in the open source file, and they say today, okay, you need to create something that support the user to develop accessible content. We cannot ask to everyone to be an accessibility expert. We need to have solutions that say, for example, okay, I put inside an image inside a CMS, inside a content, you need to give me the opportunity to add the alternative text, like do Facebook, Twitter, etc. But we need to give some baseline information also to the normal user that put content inside. Because if I talk with my wife, she put the content inside Facebook, she don't think about the alternative text. And when I told to her, she said, yes, there is an artificial intelligence that put for me. Yes, but this is now the good solution, because I think also about this topic we need to talk. In the last year, I see a lot of solution for authoring tools that say you can put this plugin and this fix magically your website for accessibility. Isn't true, because artificial intelligence cannot, at today, guarantee the total conformance of content of products. So I think there is a lot of possible of business for the company that create a solution and products that generate content. But we need to ask to them to be conformance to the EN standard in Europe, that also in clause 11.8 talk about authoring tools. Because inside the European standard, there is a reference to the authoring tools. So we need to ask to apply also this. Also, in the Annex A, when there is the reference for the European directive, Web Accessibility Directive, the clause 11.8 is signed inside. So I want to tell also, to Susanna and to the other that we need to promote that inside the EN standard, there is a reference for authoring tools, user-generated content. So we need to say the Web Accessibility Directive is not only for the information website, it's for everything that is web-based, for application and for every application that generates user content. That I say, today, every website is an authoring tool.
True. So you have made my life more complex now, all three of you. But you're absolutely right. The perspectives are huge. And I just want to stress that in the projects that we are talking about today, that now we have a more narrow idea of, or sort of the scope is more narrow. So it's not everything that could be provided, but I absolutely agree. Everything is an authoring tool. And that's, I think, why this is so important. But we have sort of narrowed it down to the CMS products to be able to cover anything. Otherwise, it would have been quite difficult to move forward, I think. But you have touched upon it, both of you, a little bit. So should we, I mean, just from a thought process, Axel said that it should be the website owner that should have the sort of responsibility for the accessibility, and that's kind of how it is in Europe today. Roberto, you're talking about that it's already in the standard, and also that the supplier has a big responsibility, because that's absolutely true. And I mean, that's what we know as well. We can provide a 100% accessible website, and 10 seconds after we deliver it to the client, it's not accessible anymore. So that's kind of hard work. But what is the solution here? Can we, I mean, how do we make sure that all of these things work together in a good way?
The solution, I think the solution is the one that I'm trying also to do here in Italy. When someone offer the website and give to the public administration or public sector body, to the company, the website, they must also give education and outreach of the employer that publish content. This is the only solution for guarantee that the CMS, so the front end and the back end of the CMS is accessible. This is a responsibility of the company that give this to the final commissioner. And then there is a responsibility, a great responsibility of the website owner that must guarantee that the content generated by their employer is accessible. Because we can have also another kind of discussion, because for example, if you are we are users of Facebook, Facebook cannot be responsible about accessibility of user-generated content. So we need to also limit the responsibility to the real content that is generated and produced by the company that owns the website.
Okay, Axel, do you want to add something to this?
Yes, I would. You know, when an organization starts a project, most of the time they're going to choose a CMS, and they may choose the CMS based on what's available in terms of plugins, in terms of, you know, what's the server look like. I mean, there are all kinds of considerations. But the reality is, you know, there is today, for anybody who is procuring technology, there is a standard. And I don't want to be big, but there is something called ATAG, you know, and ATAG Part B. And that says,
yeah, I know.
and not do. And it's actually listed with second. So,
I participate to the development of the standard. There is also my name inside, so I know the attack. Yes. Okay.
So the reality is there should be a process by which authoring tool vendors, whoever they are, should actually have a disclosure that actually follows a tag and make sure that the buyer understands, okay, this is conforming or this is not conforming. I mean, I want to know before I buy if that's a product is going to actually prevent me from doing anything accessible. Actually, that's one of the criteria. You know, the authoring tool should not prevent the user from publishing something accessible. Seems to be like a crazy idea, but that's unfortunately a very important criteria. I would add that you know, as we just heard, there is a point, a very important point, which is that a lot of services now are providing website editing functionality. So, for instance, let's put it under the umbrella of software as a service. I would look at certain areas, such as, for instance, membership platform for nonprofit organizations. Try to find a nonprofit membership association platform that includes web functionalities that is accessible. I think there are almost none around the world. It's unbelievable. So there is also the whole aspect of more and more things on the web are done so software as a service type of arrangement. And as Roberto explained before, you know, it's a catch-22 because the person who publishes the website is ultimately the responsible person. But the fact is the tool, you know, is not under his or her control. And that's a major issue in the software of the service business model.
I wanted to let Catherine in on this one as well. So please, Catherine, what do you think about who should be the responsibility and where should the sort of legal responsibility lay, do you think, in this ecosystem?
Yes, like I described at the beginning on the pollution-free city, without all the ingredients, the things are not working. But I've been listening with a lot of interest to what Axel and Roberto have been saying, and I'm even more convinced that the original advocacy that EDF and many partners did on the web directive called for the inclusion of the authoring tools. Because we know that the more outliers you have, the more areas in which you can go wrong, the harder it will be to assure accessibility, both in the original ingredients, but also as updates happen and so forth. So for us, 10 years on, we see that it is still the same thing, and the trend for, you know, user-generated content has gone even further. So maybe the review of the web directive will be a moment to consider this. I know it's included in the EN standard, but I think to have something really robust would make it more likely that the end user, the one who is finally responsible for the publication of their website, has the possibility of creating an accessible public website. If I go back to the analogy of the pollution-free city, and you see the city of Brussels has this commitment, and there's Christmas lights in the Grand Place, and they have to use sustainable energy, but there is no supply of sustainable energy. There has been no provision. It is impossible for them to do it. Or if it's random and it's very difficult for them to identify what the energy source is, like Axel has said, they should have a sort of notification that they're compliant. So there needs to be a means by which the people who are producing the websites can know that they're taking something which is in this case accessible and compliant with the standard.
So is that some kind of certification, or what are you looking for there? I mean,
no, now actually there I was saying that I think it would be good to have authoring tools specifically within the domain of the web directive, because we know that gives then everything is in one place and the standards can then also be developed to go alongside. And yeah, that's.
I would agree with Catherine, and in that my personal opinion to be effective if the directive wanted to include something new about authoring tools, it really should be an obligation for disclosure, an obligation to inform the buyer, because otherwise, again, you know, the ecosystem isn't working. You know, people need to know. People just need to know, and the disclosure is not something that is impossible to do for any person, even if it's a small enterprise. It's a disclosure is a disclosure. It's you know, just being truthful about the product.
Yeah, my idea, I try to suggest also to Italian government. I would like similar to the American view path, So every developer of products need to declare the conformance in respect of the EN standards. Only with this solution, we can also create competition between companies for have the best, the more accessible product. I think is the only solution, because if we talk about the certification process, as you know, the certification is a photography of a moment in the life of the product. So the CMS can be changed in 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. So it's very, very difficult to make the certification. And also certification is a cost. So I suggest to make the auto evaluation by company that must be public. So company must declare publicly that is conformance or not to the different point of the EN standard.
So exactly, and on the global basis, again, you have ATAG. So ATAG is there.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not rocket science. You know, it's listed. It's all the criteria are set. So you know, to do it is not complicated.
Yeah.
So the good thing is here that the Web Accessibility Directive is currently under review. So all of you will have the chance in the open public consultation that is opening this summer to have your say and express this idea to the Commission. And who knows, maybe somebody will take it up. At least it's a way of looking at the directive and see how does it really work and how can we make it work even better. So that's very good. I think also another interesting thing is in the Web Accessibility Directive, there is the third-party content, which Roberto talked about. So I can't, even if it's my website, if somebody is kind of writing on a forum or a chat in my website, I can't be responsible for what they are doing. But still in the Swedish national transposition of the Web Accessibility Directive, there is a very short but interesting paragraph about when you use, for example, social media, so third-party solutions, then you should do as much as you can to at least use the accessibility features that are in the platform. So there are possibilities also for the member state who wants to go beyond the bare minimum of the Web Accessibility Directive, and that's always nice to see. I can hear that you're very much into the legal requirements and the standards and things, and that's good. And I also personally believe in the procurement as a very good tool for making this happen. What we have tried to do in this project is to have more of a market approach. So if we just trying to round up this panel with this, if we can't go for some reason the legal way or nobody will listen to you, then what do you think? Would it be possible to have kind of a more of a business case or trying to make sure that the authoring tool producers are doing this, not because they are maybe good guys, but is there a way for us to sort of push them to do the right thing? Axel, if you start.
Well, you know, I'll go back to the initial strategy for procurement. I think, first of all, if the public sector adopts public procurement rules that actually screen any product or any technology products being purchased with public money, you know, it creates a situation where no IT vendor really can look at the situation and ignore it, because the public sector purchase of information technology is a huge proportion all around the world of the IT marketplace. So I don't think that any developer would want to be excluded from any public purchases. So to the extent that the public sector can take the leadership and influence the marketplace through public procurement, I think that is probably the strongest lever that policymakers have. Now that requires, it's easy to say, it's very difficult to implement, because as always, the devil is in the details. You know, public procurement officers, they have zillions of stuff to take into account when they purchase products and services. So accessibility is just one other layer. And how do you, if you look at the situation today, really it's not easy to evaluate products and services from an accessibility standpoint. You know, they need to be really well trained for that. So I think one of the enabler of that whole strategy is to make sure that there is appropriate training, and I would say certification of professionals, not of product, of professionals, so that their competency in accessibility is actually checked, so that they can actually do a better job in their respective responsibilities. But I think that's, at the end of the day, using the public sector procurement is really the low-hanging fruit for policymakers at this stage.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you. Roberto, a short comment. I want to give Catherine the ending words so that we can end with the end user perspective. So it's not that I'm sort of bypassing you, but, but Roberto.
Yeah. I think like Axel, I think that the main issue is that the company that products CMS and other products that create content need to understand that is not only a possibility to create tools that are accessible, but in future must be a baseline for sell products for the public administration. Because, for example, in Italy, we have a law from 2004 that required accessibility, but until arrived the Web Accessibility Directive, they aptly but not a lot the law, because there was no the responsibility to publish the accessibility statement. So the accessibility statement move a lot inside the public administration, but also move a lot companies that sell products for the public administration, because I'm teaching a lot about accessibility to companies that develop CMS, and they say that they invest in education and outreach. They employ start to think with accessibility in mind when develop the content. So they also understand that developing accessibility from the beginning cost less than fix later the products. And then they have also products that are more interesting for the public administration, because they can say, yes, my product is more accessible than the other one. So you, by law, you need to buy the more accessible product. So I invest in reorganizing my product for being more accessible. So this creates, as I told before, a competition by the products, the company that create CMS and other authoring tools products. And I think we will have an increase of accessibility by market request, not by disability people with disability requests, because there is a real request now to have products that guarantee the support for create accessible content.
Yeah, thank you. That's really what the sort of the beauty of the Web Accessibility Directive, when it works well, it's that it creates the demand. And that's exactly what we see. And just to connect with what Axel said, we also see a demand from the supplier side. There are many more generalist ICT suppliers that now are asking for training, and that is because they also want to be certified, because in some countries we see that as an award criteria for all sorts of accessibility audits. So thank you very much. Catherine, I will leave the last word to the end user perspective, because that is why we do this. So the most important thing always. So what do you think? Is there a market opportunity here, a business opportunity, or is this sort of the legal? What's your take on this?
The thing is, the market opportunity, which Roberto and Axel referred to, is the legal perspective, ultimately. Public procurement is already obliged to purchase accessibly. That was created by demand. The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities was because people with disabilities campaigned for it and asked for it. And governments met their responsibilities towards their citizens. And the Web Directive was also a result of years of advocacy in order to create this legal obligation. The legal obligation, when applied to public procurement, is a huge market opportunity. But let's not forget where it came from in the first place. And something that you had a wonderful opening speaker, the motivational speaker, Bruce, he said something about giving people the opportunity to challenge and to demand better. So linking this back to the legal obligation, it's really important that people with disabilities can actually see the statement, make a claim, say this is not accessible, I cannot use it, I haven't been able to make the appointment for my COVID vaccination, or I haven't been able to make my appointment, and use the recourse to claim their rights as well. But this element of market and public procurement we see as a huge driver, but also a part of democracy. None of us here, or any of the 140 people listening, want to see our taxpayers' money, the money that we pay in taxes, used to create more barriers for anyone. We want our governments to invest in public services for the public, for everyone. And so I think I'm really excited now about the next stages in the Web Directive, thinking of the great discussion we've had today and how we go forward to look at really strengthening that, because it has been such a lever for change. So thank you very much for the invitation again.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you, Axel. Thank you, Roberto. Very good discussion. And as always, having the three of you is like herding cats. This could have gone on for a couple of hours more and being equally interesting, I'm sure, but I also need to present some of the projects that we are doing. So thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. Thank you for having you with us today. And I hope you stay on for the rest of the event. And now I will try to share my screen, and let's see if I can make that happen in a good way. So let's see what I have. What can I get a message from someone? Eva or someone, do you see my screen?
We can see your screen.
Thank you very much. So now we're going to switch my mind into do the presentation of one of the projects here. So We for Authors cluster. We do have some of the partners, or I think all of the partners with us today as well, also as panelists. So you will hear from them soon. But let me start with this. The We for Authors cluster project is the second step or the second phase of a pilot project that we've done in 2018, 2019, where we, as Axel mentioned, we measured or tried to figure out which authoring tools are the most used ones in public sector in Europe. We found around 80-ish, but that doesn't mean that there are not many more, of course. We didn't crawl every public sector website, and also some of them don't really show which tool they use. But the most used authoring tools that we could detect, it was very interesting, this research, because as we already, most of us probably know, this is a very regional affair. The European Commission thinks that everything is about the inner market, but really most people or most public sector bodies, they buy their authoring tool quite local or regional. And that is to know, it's no surprise. You want to maybe have a coffee with your supplier if it's not COVID, and you want to speak the same language and so on. There are a couple of really big players that sort of cover more or less many of the EU member states, of all of them, but it's a very regional affair. So we have collected the ones that are most in use, and we then selected the ones that we think had the most possibilities to work together. And even if they do have very different approaches, they have different business models, they're open source, licensed and hybrids and all sorts of things, they do have common challenges. Because as we saw already in the pilot project and also in the research we have done in this project, many of the web authors, they complain about the same things. The same things are difficult no matter which authoring tool you're using. Of course, there are differences, but there are some basic things that sort of come again and again in this research. So we thought if they have common challenges, then there should be kind of a joint potential. Why don't we try to work together with the largest market players and see if we can share knowledge and do something for the community? So if we don't go the legalistic or policy road, but really try to start with the market and work together. That's kind of a new idea for us. We usually start with the public sector, but here we wanted to reach out to the market and see if we could make them work together. So that was the basic idea behind this research project. And it was funded by the European Commission under DG Connect. So you could, this is the cluster can mean many different things, but what we wanted to show was that really to have a market cluster. So Funka, as leaders of this, we are the accessibility experts. And then we had Sight Vision, which is a licensed product from Sweden. We had Kit Concept from Germany, representing the Plone community, open source community. We had Drupal represented by Civic Actions, so all the way from North America. We also got Tiny MCE, which is really not an authoring tool, but an editor on board, which is also very exciting. So we got that comments from Australia, which is always nice when we reach far, even though Tiny is a Swedish company. And Tiny, I think, have correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe 80% or so of the editor market worldwide. So that's really a big player as well. So it's very nice to have you on board as well. We have, of course, IAAP to make sure that we have the supplier market represented. And then we also have subcontractors in the project to make sure that we can build this cluster in a good way. So we have Joomla represented by the foundation, J& Beyond in Germany. And we have Nexer, who is the supplier here representing Umbraco. And we will have Umbraco, the tool maker Umbraco, in the panel later this afternoon. So a very good spread of different kinds of tools and suppliers and producers and everything in between, working together for this common goal to see if we can make sure that, well, if we have all these millions of people who need to be trained, and even if Roberto says the only way is to train them, I don't think we can train them all. We don't have the bandwidth to do that training. So we need to make sure that the tools do better. We need to automate more, even if I agree we can't automate everything, but as much as possible should be accessible by default. And the things that are not possible to do automatically, well, let's support the web authors a little better than we do today. Because all the tools that we have looked into during these years, they are too complicated. It's too difficult for an average web author to understand how to make things accessible. You really need to know accessibility before you start this. Even in the ones that do provide good accessibility sort of output, it's still difficult on the editor side, where the web authors are trying to really create the content. There you need to have quite a lot of experience and knowledge about accessibility to make it happen. So that's what we wanted to change. We did look at kind of two perspectives to choose what to do with this, because it's a huge task, of course, but we wanted to make sure that we base this on the user needs, and users in this case are the users of the tool, so the web authors here, their needs and demands, and also the technical feasibility. There's no really meaning, there's no point in us having a research and innovation project where we come up with super fancy solutions that nobody can really implement in their tools. And that's the real positive part of having the market in the project already, because these tool producers can tell us this will never fly, this is not possible, this is not business-wise feasible, and so on. So we wanted to make sure that this could not only be used by the tool makers that we had in the consortium, but also hopefully the rest of the market, or as much of the market as possible. So together we discussed what are the most common problems, how can we solve them together in a good way, or how can the tools solve them? Then we also looked at what's already out there, because there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. If somebody already has a good solution, then why can't we use it? And that has been very rewarding for us leading this project, that the partners have really been sharing their knowledge a lot and sharing good ideas and solutions, and also pointing outside the consortium saying, hey, there's another tool maker here, they're not in, but let's have a look at what they're doing and get inspiration from them. So very much kind of sharing community style project is very nice. And after deciding what we wanted to focus on, then we have been doing testing. And I think that is one of the positive things from the toolmakers' perspective here, that they have got more resources to do user testing than what they normally do in a very sort of fast-moving environment where they need to update very quickly and develop things. We have been able to be sort of very nerdy, looking into small details and making sure that we have a lot of web authors doing the testing. We also want to make sure that the things we recommend, the results of the project, is something we can all stand behind. So all the partners of the project, we need to sort of believe in this. We need to believe that it can be implemented, it can work, and it actually helps someone. So that has been also a common goal for this. And I should have said from the beginning that the project is not ending yet. We wanted to have this demonstration event early so that we don't sort of disappear into the summer holidays, but we haven't really produced all the results yet, but we're close to, and so everything will be possible for you to find in a couple of weeks. So during this project, we have done a user test with more than 100 web authors from across Europe and beyond. More than 20 countries have participated. And we have had authors from local, regional, national level, large organizations, small organizations, also some NGOs, some commercial partners and so on, but trying to focus on the public sector web authoring environment and their specific needs. And because we have been reaching out to them, we as the whole consortium, of course, I mean, we can't prove this, but I think that the people who have been interested and helping us in the testing, they are probably more interested or even experienced in accessibility than the sort of average web author out there, because we tend to have more contact with people that are interested in accessibility. And if you are asked to do a lengthy online test taking 1.5 hours or something, you need to be a little bit interested in the topic, I think. So we are well aware that we can't sort of scientifically say that we have tested on the whole range of competencies out there, and therefore we have also combined all the testing we have done with workshops where we have reached out to clients that we already know, where we have people in the sort of central communication staff who are interested in accessibility and knowledgeable, but who also have a group of web authors with less experience, and maybe people who don't even create content very often. If you do publish once a month, then also you don't remember how to do things. So we have had additional workshops together with people that we also know are less experienced. And that has also been very helpful in making sure that we sort of cover the right items here. So the features we decided on focusing on are the following. The tables creator, we know that tables are really difficult to create. We also wanted to make sure we had a feature on the change language of parts, because that is, I shouldn't say nowhere to be found, but at least a rare thing in authoring tools, that you can actually change the language of just a part of your content. Forms is another thing, just like tables, very complicated. A lot of things can go wrong. Many accessibility fails when we look at it from the auditing side. So the forms editor is also something we wanted to cover. Of course, everyone's favorite, the alternative text description, we've seen that before, but we wanted to make sure that that is also covered in our recommendations, of course. And then we have a small piece on the video accessibility. So those 5 are the ones where we provide kind of solutions or ideas that we have now tested and have recommendations on how to implement these features in the tools directly. So sort of objects. And then we have the second half of the project is covering features that are slightly different. So for example, documentation. We have seen that this is something the web authors really need and demand. And documentation can of course be done in many ways. So we have done user testing with trying to see if the documentation or the information about accessibility features should be in context or separately. How much detail do you need? How should it be presented? And so on and so forth. So really trying to make sure that if I am interested in accessibility, or if I have forgotten how to do something, that I get a good support, so that it's also a training process in using the tool. And then we have 4 features that cover testing in different ways. So including testing in the authoring process. So you don't need to first publish something and then do the testing afterwards, but we wanted it to be sort of continuously testing. So we have one feature where like a spell checker really, that is pointing out potential problems while I am editing things. And another one where I can then, when I'm sort of almost pushing the publish button, I can then test the full page. So all the different objects that I have produced in my web page. And then of course the full testing of the whole website, which can be maybe more useful for the website owner to make sure that this unit or this part of the website have more problems, or we need to focus our training here. So it's more of a control mechanism or monitoring. And of course, testing of documents, the beloved PDFs that are everywhere. And other documents, of course, but the possibility to check your document before you publish it, and also to make sure that you can remediate before publishing. That was kind of the idea for the feature of selecting, of testing documents. So, and the features will all be presented in the same way, and we are running a little late, so I won't do the demo, but there will be packages like this on the project website. They are just refined, the last bits and pieces, but we are presenting them like short videos where we have presented the features from different angles. So we have the problem. What is the problem here? How come it's so difficult to make tables, for example, accessible, and what does it mean for the end user? So the end user perspective of the problem. So why is this important? And then we present the web author perspective. So we have web authors with testimonials saying that this is how I have been trying to do this during my whole life as a web author, or this is what is problematic in the tools that I have used. So really the challenge from the perspective of the author, so that the authoring tool producer can understand how to make this easier. Then, of course, we present the solution. So we have built prototypes and we do screen recordings with the voiceover telling you what the recommended solution looks like. Sometimes we have alternatives because we realize that not everything can be exactly the same, but the solution that we are sort of behind and recommending this, and then what, if you use this solution, what the result will be for the end user. So the hallelujah moment in the end. And we have been discussing how important it is to really not only show the technical parts and the code, but also show the human parts. So it's human perspective from the web author side, really how this supports the web author in making it easier. And of course, also the end result for the end user is extremely important to explain, specifically when it comes to either the complex ones like tables creators and form editor, but also for the change language of parts, for example, where we saw that a majority of the people who did the testing, even if they claim to be either experienced or very experienced in accessibility, most of them didn't know about that success criteria at all. We also have code examples in these features, in the presentation of the features, and we have specific technical specification on the site. So there's a documentation for the authoring tools that would like to implement this in their own environments. So all of this will be presented shortly. We have a project website, and everything will be online within the next couple of weeks. So this is how we decided to sort of create or present the result of the problems. And the idea is that it should inform and inspire both developers and designers, but also website owners and web authors. So the whole ecosystem gets something out of this, hopefully. So we try to be pedagogical. And I went to the example. Just a couple of thoughts around what we have struggled with when we decided on the recommendations here. So there are some things we have been discussing at length in the consortium, and there are more than these, but just a couple of examples. So we have already touched upon artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how you can make, for example, image recognition and things like that automatically suggested. That is certainly not working perfectly, but what we can see from the user testing we have done is that if you provide a suggestion for example, an alternative text, then the web author tend to want to change it or correct it. So it's more likely that the web author will actually do something with the alternative text if there is an automatic suggestion in there. And I know, for example, in languages like Swedish, these features are not working very well in either of the software that have them as a standard right now. Mostly we get the fantastic alternative texts of something saying this is a picture of text or this is a picture of something. So it doesn't really help, but in some languages, of course, it does. We think there's a learning process here, and something providing the automatic suggestion could potentially, hopefully, make web authors more aware and in sort of stepwise make this better. Of course, there's also a problem with these technologies not being absolutely for free right now. So this is something that not all tools will be able to implement directly, but we believe that in a couple of years, this will change. Another discussion point that we have sort of come back to many times, sorry, is the mandatory thing. So we get this a lot from web authors, that please can't you just make it impossible to make something that is inaccessible? And that's kind of nice. It's a good idea. If you make it impossible to make mistakes, then everything will be perfect, right? But from reality, we have learned that this is not always possible. Sometimes you need the possibility to override things. Sometimes it won't help if you make it mandatory, then people make mistakes by doing it mandatory. So it's not kind of black and white. And really, surprisingly, big majority of the people who have been participating in the testing and interviews and surveys, they say, make everything mandatory, we just want it to work, which is, I think, encouraging. But also here we have thought that we need maybe a little bit of flexibility, or that there are different groups of web authors maybe. So it could be mandatory for the people who are doing this, who are not publishing content so often, and maybe somebody sort of in a higher level can then be the one overriding or sort of solving the problem. So, but there are things like that where we need to be flexible. So all the features are not do this and everything will be fixed, but more like we are reasoning around, this is one way of doing it, this is another way, we believe this is good, but because of the context or situation or other parts, you may need to focus on one feature or the other. So very rewardingly, many of the things that we have provided are really either already being or soon being implemented in the authoring tools, or they have made a decision that they will implement this in the tools, or they are planning to do it, or they are discussing how to do it. Some of them are difficult, for example, the image recognition because of the technology not being free and so on. But really a majority of the recommendations that we are providing in this project is already sort of in the planning phase of implementation for the majority of our partners. And that means that we have actually made an impact already. And hopefully this will mean that the other players that are not part of the project will join forces and do the same thing, if this is actually a business case, which we of course hope and think. So we do hope that we have that this project will have an impact on the rest of the market through this event, of course, reaching out, and also the other events that we are doing, focusing on public sector web authors and end users with disabilities. And we welcome any market player who is interested in joining us or learning more, or just jumping on the last bits and pieces of the project or whatever, then please do reach out, because we are really happy to welcome anyone else that wants to be on board and learn more about this, or maybe, who knows, create another project. We would like to see some kind of continuation of this. So with that, I will open up for questions from the audience. And I know that we have some of the cluster partners are also here to us to answer questions. So do we have any questions in the chat maybe? Seems like it's more of a
Susanna, I think we lost you. Can you hear us? You are muted.
Yeah,
now we have you back.
So I don't know really what happened there, but so it doesn't seem that we have any questions. Or am I missing something?
There were two questions in Q&A, but Roberto answered them. I don't know, maybe if you wanna repeat them in case someone didn't get them. Otherwise, there's just a discussion going on in chat, but no really questions.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to find those Q&A questions. So
there's one question in the chat now. I have an impression that open source CMS is doing better than commercial ones. Any data? Question mark.
Yeah, Mike, Brian, anyone you wanna? I do not know. We don't have any scientific data on this, but maybe you have a hunch.
I think Mike has just shared in the chat a link to WebAIM's research and the projects, the top 1 million sites. That gives a pretty good indication, at least of those large sites, that the open source solutions are possibly doing better, but statistics lies, damn lies, and statistics. So it's hard to give any real concrete data on that.
In Sweden, at least, it was the commercial ones that were early on implementing accessibility support for the customers demanding it, and but open sources are really going fast now.
Yeah, I mean, I can comment as a commercial vendor. So, you know, obviously my answer has bias, and I'm going to give the wishy-washy answer. It really depends. You know, I think it's in a lot of cases, you know, some commercial vendors will do better on the output side of things, you know, particularly if they're providing frameworks for templates. You know, there was comment earlier about, you know, for example, WordPress and the output compliance being very dependent on the template, whereas, you know, commercial vendors tend not to have a larger distributed template community, and they tend to have more tools for evaluating accessibility of the output. But even that's not a rule. I mean, it really depends upon the commercial vendor. And then as for compliance in the authoring environment itself, again, it also varies. There's compliance for the content that you are creating. And then even for a commercial vendor, you know, for example, for ourselves, you know, you can use TinyMCE, or you can, you know, swap that out and use a different, you know, editor. And so if you're doing things like tables, the accessibility will depend upon the editor within the tool, which then, you know, also is tied to the output. So it's a really tough thing. But I guess to Johann's point, there is a lot of question, or a lot of the compliance is sort of driven by the market and the commercial pressures that are being put on that. So, you know, I know within Scandinavia, you know, EpiServer, you know, now Optimizely has to do, you know, a lot for that customer base that is very localized, and that customer base demands it. Therefore, we put a priority on it. You know, that's also true for, you know, a lot of people using open source in sort of governmental and non-governmental situations as well. So it's a really messy answer.
But thank you. Good try. So we did get a question in the chat. Did this study cover any scenarios of user-generated content where the public creates and shares content such as video or rich text, as opposed to content created by staff of the website itself? So we didn't really look at the content as such, but more what the web author can, how the web author can make sure that the content becomes accessible. And really the focus has been on public sector bodies and how their staff, their web authors, are creating content, because this whole funding is part of making sure that the Web Accessibility Directive works better, and that's why we sort of have this kind of limited scope. So that's a no on that one. And now people did wake up and start asking questions. So thank you for that. We have a question: where your authoring tool is going? I participated to the test of it. Any progress? I don't really know which authoring tool that is meant to be, but we did in these two projects. We have been doing one in the cluster project. We are doing prototypes. In the FEAT project that I will present soon, we are doing templates for Episerver or Optimizely. So it's not a tool itself. I mean, we haven't created a new tool. We have tried to make sure that the existing tools can be better. And we have already launched the FEAT results. I will soon come to that. The cluster results will be there shortly. So I think we are going in the right direction, and we will hopefully help other existing tools to become better. And the partners of this can also say, I mean, Brian, I know that Joomla is at least discussing or thinking about implementing some of the features we have talked about, and I think also Drupal is on the same path. So you want to comment on just if there's any progress from the tool makers' perspective?
Yeah, from speaking purely for Joomla, we have a new release coming out very shortly, which we're trying to address some of the results of this research and project. But as with anything, timescales, deadlines. So a lot of it will not be in the 4.0 release, which will be coming very shortly, but in the following release, the 4.1, which gives us more opportunity to fine-tune the research and the features to our specific marketplace and our specific user base and coding environments.
Okay, thank you.
I can say that there's certainly some progress in Drupal, not as much as we would like in this pandemic year, but certainly some. But also to echo with Brian, like in any open source project, it takes time to go off and build community momentum and get consensus around any given technical implementation. So some of the changes may hopefully get into Drupal 9 in that cycle, but some may not be in place until Drupal 10. So that's quite a ways away, given that many sites are still using Drupal 7.
Yeah, and that's, of course, I mean, things takes time, I agree, and we can't expect the authoring tool producers to all of a sudden make everything do everything that we created in this project immediately. So the project will end, and then I think we hopefully see a lot of progress after the project end. And if we can maybe continue to work together, then maybe even more. But I think we need to make sure to understand that this whole development process does take time for all tool makers. It wasn't like they were sitting down waiting for something to do when we approached them with this project. So they were on their ongoing processes and backlogs and things. So we have two questions about more or less the same thing. Yeah, in both. Hello, Jorge. Thank you for asking things in both the chat and the Q&A. Makes life easier for me. How can a public agency ask for a CMS manufacturer that they need to follow the guidelines to the FEAT project? Is it possible? Do you have some notes that allows us to do that? And then he's mentioning one of the authoring tools. Yes, there will be technical. I will answer in the sort of political way. Yes, there is technical specifications both for cluster and FEAT, so that you can actually provide them with sort of inspiration or guidelines on how to do that. We will have specific guidelines for other tool makers. So for example, in FEAT, where we have the templates, we have a specific technical documentation and guidelines for if you want to use or be inspired by the templates in other tools. So that's definitely possible. Of course, we cannot force them to it. That needs somebody from the policy side, we'll need to do that. But definitely we will have technical specification, documentation, and guidelines to support other tool makers to make sure this is having an impact on the rest of the market. So thank you for that question. The last question, I think, in the Q&A that we can do before the coffee break is, how are you dealing with companies that are promoting being accessible and once it's in use, it's a nightmare experience? Yeah, well, make sure that you write in the contract that it should be accessible, I would say. That's something that mysteriously few of our clients do. They are very, even if they are very nice people, they are very bad at writing contracts. I think in each contract, if you are requiring accessibility, might it be from a supplier or an authoring tool provider or whatever, you should require accessibility. And if they don't deliver accessible, then, well, don't pay them. So that's, I think that is a contract issue more than anything else. And you need, of course, to control that. You make the requirements, then you get something, then you need to control that it's actually what you asked for. So that's kind of more of a procurement process and contracting process. So it's now 2:30, so we will have a short coffee break for everyone to just stretch your legs or have a coffee or do something else, get away from keyboard for a while, do move around if you can, and that's always important, take some fresh air. And we will be back at 2:45 Central European time to listen to the presentation of the FEAT project, which is the accessibility in templates based on Episerver, also known as Optimizely. And then we will get back with the very exciting industry panel that is the ending of all of this. So you will hear more from my colleagues, Brian, Mike, and Mark, and also other distinguished panelists from Plone, Sightvision, and Umbraco, and Tiny. I think I got everyone there. So 15 minutes coffee break. See you soon. Thank you. So I'm not sure if I am sharing or not. It says sharing is being paused.
You're sharing, Susanna, but it's not in the presentation view now.
Okay, so now is it looking the way it should?
Yep.
Yeah, always something new. I never really know how to do that. Exciting. So welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being with us this lovely afternoon. Now here comes another presentation of yet another project on authoring tools, accessibility. So we just have a short presentation of the FEAT project before, and then a Q&A on that project. And then we have the industry panel discussion before we will leave you to your afternoon or morning. So the FEAT project is an acronym for Features for Accessibility Through Templates. So that is kind of a sister project to Cluster. We are doing both of them at the same time under the same funding. So this is also based on the previous pilot project that we did, but this has another setup and idea. And I can't click. So the aim of this project is to, of course, provide hands-on solutions for web authors in public sector again. So it's the same kind of end goal, but we are trying to achieve it in another way. So in the FEAT project, we really focus on accessibility by default. So what can we make sure is in the tool already from the beginning so that the user doesn't, or the web author doesn't have to think about accessibility. And for the parts that we cannot automate, what can we build in as support measures? So how can we support the user in doing the few things that we can't automate here? We are using model templates to make this happen. We can't touch the core of the tool, there are many things in the backbone of an authoring tool that we cannot touch, but the templates as such, we can make sure to make them as accessible as it's possible to really make sure that to provide a better accessibility. And in this case, we are using the EpiServer as the model for this, but of course the idea is to stimulate the whole market. So we are using one license tool to make templates to that we really know will work for this tool. And then the idea is that all the features that we have come up with in this project will also be able to use in other tools that are using the same types or kinds of templates, or just be inspired to do it in their own way. So that's the idea behind this project. And when we started it, we started with EpiServer, but during the time, EpiServer has changed its name to Optimizely, and I could hear that Mark still talked about EpiServer, and I think I will as well, because it takes time to change the name. I've been talking about EpiServer for 15 years or so, so please excuse me if I use the terms a little bit inconsequent maybe. But anyway, we are EpiServer partners, and we have been producing websites in EpiServer since 2005-ish. And that's why we thought that EpiServer has a good baseline for accessibility. It's not perfect, absolutely not. And it's not better or worse than the top 20 or 30 or so other publishing or authoring tools out there that we have sort of seen, but this one happens to be the one that we know best. Also in the Nordic countries, it's quite a big market player in public sector, so it goes well hand in hand with what we could achieve in this project. But I want to stress that the templates are made for Optimizely, but optimized, I hope, for being able to use in other authoring tools as well. So that's quite important. So in this project, we have, again, had a very user-centric approach, of course. We started out with surveys and also in-depth interviews with web authors. And then we built a test environment. So this time we didn't really do prototyping because we didn't have to. We could go directly into the real stuff and build a test environment for Optimizely. We developed also user scenarios based on what the web authors told us was the most problematic parts of web authoring, or where they are most in doubt about how to do things, or where we could see that end users suffer from the result not being accessible. So trying to find out where are the most common problems here. And then we did a little bit of pilot testing, because this is not sort of your ordinary user test that kind of anyone from the street can get on and just do the testing. Because we are doing this in the testing environment of a specific tool, then you need to have at least a little bit of background in this tool or a similar tool to be able to perform the test. Is quite complex. So we wanted to make sure that that happened in a good way, and did quite a lot of piloting before we let this out in the wild, so to speak. And then we have done, of course, multiple user testing throughout the iterations of this development process. And also, again, interviews with selected web authors to see what we can even improve more, and if they understood the different things and so on. And there was also a sort of after survey connected to the user testing. So we also got some statistics on what they thought about the different features and so on. So the selection criteria we have used for which templates to focus on has been kind of a series of selection criteria. Well, there's a frequency of use. We wanted to make sure that the templates or blocks or objects or parts of the templates that we are providing are the ones that are often used, because that will obviously have the most impact. Also, we have looked at from the sort of the outside, when we work as accessibility experts, where do we find the most accessibility problems? So the frequency of the failures from an accessibility standpoint, when you look at it from the end user perspective. And then, of course, the technical feasibility. We need to know that whatever we want to provide here as support for the web authors is possible to make inside of the templates, because again, we can't sort of rewrite the whole code for Episerver or Optimizely, but we need to focus on what is possible in the templates. And then we also looked at what the web authors that we were interviewing and making surveys with, what they perceived as being most difficult when creating accessible content. So this is have been the sort of the starting point for the selection. And also, of course, we wanted to make sure that whatever we do also have an importance for the end users with disabilities. So really having the key elements in place so that we don't exclude anyone. This has been extremely important as well. And I should have said that Episerver/Optimizely is not part of this project. They are not part of the research project and not partnering in that case, but they have been very supportive during the whole process and made sure that we have been in contact with a lot of their clients and partners as well. So we have been able to reach out to both people that are now using the tool and also suppliers who are implementing the tool. So that has been a very fruitful collaboration for us, even if they're formally not part of the research project. So the features that we finally came up with after all of these discussions with authors and so on were the framework, the starting page or the homepage of the website, the article page, which is of course the one you use most for almost everything, sort of the basic page, the calendar event page, the page listing block, the calendar listing block, the text block, the image block. Text and image blocks are also more or less always used. The forms block, again, just like in Cluster, this is one of the things that people struggle a lot with, and also the video block. So these are the 10 features that we have now developed sort of accessibility solution or accessible solutions for and packaged them into a package of templates ready to use directly for Optimizely web authors. And really one of the coolest thing I think for around this project is that we have been doing the user testing in real life settings, because that has made the whole process very different from what we usually do in user testing. And this means that we have been more or less only asking Optimizely users to do the testing. We have had some other web authors as well, but then they have been very experienced and had maybe tried different kinds of tools so that they felt sort of comfortable with this. But to do the testing, you need to understand the basic of this tool. Otherwise, it becomes too complicated to really detect where is the if they detect something that they find is difficult, then we don't know if it's because they don't know the tool, or if it's the accessibility features that is sort of the problem. So that's why we wanted to narrow down the testing panels. We also did a pre-interview with some of the web authors that were doing continuous testing for us to make sure that we understand their level of knowledge of accessibility, for how long they have been using the tool, and other sort of prerequisites that makes it easier for us to understand the outcome of the testing process. And then they have been creating actual content. So this is why I like this so much. Each of the test participants have been creating websites. So this kind of testing environment and research project that usually creates kind of blah blah things, we have been creating real websites. And I happened to write in one of the reports that this is, I see this as kind of a work of art, and I think we should publish it. And my friend said, my colleague said, no, don't write that, it seems strange. But it was really interesting to see what people did publish when they were doing this testing, because they got user scenarios and they were told that you are supposed to write this or do that or add this. And of course, they didn't just write Lorem Ipsum texts, but they were really providing their favorite poetry or their favorite pictures or something like that. So a very nice kind of community came out of this, and the internet now has another set of websites out there. That really interesting that they could do sort of content creation for real from start to end goal, and then reflect on how is this whole environment looking when I compare to what I usually have in the same tool but in another setup, a sort of a standard setup back home, and is it making it easier for me to make sure that the content is created in an accessible way. After this, we had a survey after the testing to make sure that we sort of could grasp what was working well and what was difficult. And this made it possible for us to do a continuous iteration and improve the whole setup of this thing in a very concrete and constructive way. And we were sort of amazed by the turnout of this, because it's a long and cumbersome testing, and still a lot of web authors were happy to do it, and they gave us extremely positive feedback afterwards. So we have, I think the lowest number was 72 or something, but really most of the questions we asked were above 85 or 90, that this feature is easy to use, it is really helpful, it will support me, and yes, as soon as it is in the market, I will try to make sure that we implement it in my tool. So extremely positive response from the test community, which is of course very rewarding. And we have been working very closely with some of the testers also to make sure that we do the refinements by the end of this. And just as an example, because the problem, I should show this first, but the problem with these templates are that most of the accessibility that we provide is invisible, because it's automatically accessible and it's built in by default. So how do you show someone that this is fantastic if you can't show it? Because it's like good design. Then when you don't think about it, then that's really functional and good. So this is kind of the same way. So instead of trying to show you something that you can't see, I will show you the difference between what the sort of standard setup is and what we are trying to provide here. So to create an accessible article page with a template that is not created with any accessibility in mind, you have to, well, you can do this in different orders, of course, but sooner or later you need to create the preamble. Then you mark the text, you select the font, and you then remember to use the same font for the preamble as is used in other pages. You select the text size, and then hopefully remember to use the same text size for the preamble as is used in other pages again. And then you select the color of the text and remember to check the contrast, of course. Then you move on to create the text body, which is more or less the same thing, the fonts, the text size, and the color of the text. Then you add structure to the text using headings. As everyone knows, headings are really important. So you need to mark it and select the correct heading level and select the font and the text size and so on and so forth. And then if you want to add any lists, like bullet point lists or other lists, then you need to add that structure as well manually with the font and text size, and check that they are coded in the correct way. Then if you have any links on the page, which you usually have, then you need to make sure that that is accessible, and then the tables, and then the forms in different ways, and the images, and so on and so forth. That's kind of a long list of things that you need to make sure that you do in the correct way for your content to become accessible. And this is, of course, extremely hard for anyone to remember if you don't publish every day, and also very hard to train people to do the right way. This is too hard for the users. So what we have tried to do is to facilitate this by making sure that most of the accessibility is already there from the beginning. So the web author doesn't have to think about all these things. So if we compare this with the feature that we are now providing, the feature of an accessible article page, then most of these things are already accessible by default. So the template as such is accessible from the beginning, and we try to provide a maximum flexibility, because sometimes there is a contradiction between making things sort of automatically accessible and then the web author can't do anything because it's kind of fixed and you need to be in this box. And we know that doesn't work in reality. So we have tried to make sure that the author has maximum flexibility, can move things around, but still all the items and objects as such are accessible. So all the elements are accessible and not possible to make inaccessible again. And we have specific design patterns. Of course, you can decide on which design pattern you want, but some kind of, the design should be the same so it becomes consequent throughout the website. And if you check the color contrast or whatever it should be once, it shouldn't be necessary to check it on all the pages. Also, we have the predefined formats so that you don't need to figure out which kind of format you're using in this situation or in that context, but everything should be predefined and ready to use and fully accessible. Also, for the things that we cannot automate, things that we cannot build into the templates, we have made sure that we do this by trying to hold the hand of the web author and support them on the way. And when something is done and maybe not accessible, then we provide a warning. So if you try to publish something that is not accessible, then you will at least get a warning before. So it's your decision, but we will tell you, hey, this is not a good idea. So just some examples for example, the headings. These are shown in a logical way so that you can choose the ones you need, and the fonts and the sizes and everything will be set, and they will be technically accessible from the start. So you don't try to make them bold or big or something like that, but you use the right header from the start in this template. And also, oh, this is probably very small, but if you try to publish an image and you forget or try to override the alt text, then you need to mark it as decorative. Otherwise, the system will tell you, hey, something went wrong. You need to make sure that you have an alternative text description on this image, or actively say that you shouldn't have it. So you can't just sort of let it go. So this way, we try to provide a combination of built-in accessibility and support for the web authors, so that we all the way try to sort of prompt them or push them gently in the right direction, and then giving them warnings if something goes wrong anyway. So, and just some of the quotes from the testers that we have been interviewing and done in the service. So I think it's a very good way to work with accessibility. If you don't publish very often, you forget about accessibility, even if you don't know about it, I think. Or the other way around, you don't know, and in this way, you learn to do it right. So that's one of the really positive quotes we got from people testing this. And another one is, we have a lot of people publishing on our web pages, and it would be great to force them, quote unquote, to use alt text titles, etc. We spend a lot of time reminding them of it. So hopefully with our templates, they are not forced, but they are supported to do the right thing. Some of it will be automatic, and what cannot be automated will at least be prompted, and then with a warning sign, so they need to deliberately make it inaccessible if they prefer to. And another quote is, a great way to ensure you do not miss important accessibility features. So I think all in all, we have had very positive response on this, and it is really clear that it has made the accessible publishing easier for the web authors that have tested this. Again, this is the group of testers are, well, they know their tool already, and they are probably quite interested in accessibility, but not all of them say that they kind of knew all of this before, but they really want to have this support, not to need to, so that they do not need to be accessibility experts, but they can sort of focus on being good at publishing and good at writing and so on. And the accessibility will be more handled by the system. So that's what they are really happy about seeing. So this is of course just, this is more or less, we are approaching the end of the project. So in this case, you can see the demo website already, it's up and running. We haven't submitted it yet to the Commission, so we have yet another 1.5 weeks to make it even nicer, but you can look at it if you are interested or at looking at how it is. But really, we know that this is just the start of this process, of course, because we have sort of opened a door to something that we would like to pursue. And the result of this project, just as the cluster project, will of course be free for anyone to use. That's very important when we are working with taxpayers' money. So the demo of this, the sort of where you can see the result of the project, is live on www.funka.com/feat, F-E-A-T. So that's where you can see the demo part of the result of the project and the templates, and you can see also short descriptions of how they work and so on. We are also providing technical specifications and guidelines for authoring tools, for other authoring tool producers and providers and suppliers. And these are going to be published during next week on the same website. So that will be a package where you can see all the different parts of this. So the technical specifications are describing how the templates work and all the features work and how they're supposed to be implemented. And then we have more of a, the guidelines are more aimed at the authoring tools that are, well, not the Optimizely suppliers, but other suppliers and other authoring tools who would like to use the templates in their work. So like Jorge was asking for, how do we make sure that other tool makers can use this? Well, these are the documentation that will be published next week that you can use for that purpose. We are also now packaging all these templates in a way so that it can be published on the Optimizely Marketplace and Foundation, which is where the Optimizely partners and suppliers and clients go to sort of download their material and make sure that they have the latest updates of everything. So this will be provided, these templates will be provided like a specific sort of accessibility package. And we are currently in the process of making that validation. It's a formal process for these templates to be ready to be published on the Optimizely website. So I don't know how long that takes, but it's a formal process, and well, it shouldn't be too long. But the project is still due until July, so we still have some weeks to go. But hopefully we will be able to present this also to the partners of the Optimizely partners and community before the summer. And we will also publish the code, the whole package of the template for other suppliers and other tool makers in Bitbucket. And I guess that will happen at the same time. So this is what is happening with the FEAT project. So again, these are kind of the specific templates made for one tool specifically, but hopefully useful and usable for the whole market, whereas the cluster is kind of the other way around. We do something very broad and open for everyone, but you need to implement it before it really starts working. So this is a little bit more hands-on. So just to summarize for both of these projects, as I mentioned before, this is the first event we do to sort of promote this to the world. Well, that is not true, because we have been doing a lot of events and external events presenting the projects in other contexts and other industry player events and so on. I think we have reported more or less 6,000 people have been registered to events where we have been presenting this. So we have had a good outreach already, but this is the first event where we present the project results to a broader audience as part of the project. And in a couple of weeks' time, so the 1st of June, we will have this public sector web workshop. So if you're interested in knowing more on how to use the tools and more sort of direct working with them, and very specifically for the web author community, then please sign up for the 1st of June. It's also free of charge, of course. And then on the 9th of June, we have a specific event together with the European Disability Forum that we co-organize this year's accessibility update. So we do regularly have, every 6 months, we do a research update on accessibility where we sort of give back to the community of the end users and tell and explain what we are doing, the latest news from the research and innovation we are doing, and so on. So this time we are doing it together with EDF to get a broader outreach throughout Europe. And we will also present the results of this project at that event, but more than from the end user perspective. And I also want to add that there is a lot more to be done. Even if we are very happy about these projects, there is still one very important aspect that we have touched upon in this project, but not kind of solved. And that is, of course, the editor environment for people with disabilities. So the web authors with disabilities, how their editing environment is going to be better from an accessibility point of view. And we hope to get funding to cover that as well in future projects. But as for now, we have done some testing, and we have made sure that the results that we are providing are not creating barriers, but it has not been in scope of these projects to really solve those issues, because they are sometimes not in the hands of the tool makers even. So that's another story, but but a very important perspective, of course, to cover as well. So now I hope I have my colleague Per with me for the Q&A if we get any technical questions about the FEAT project and how Optimizely works. Hey, Per, good.
Hello there.
So let's see if we have any complicated questions that I will give you. So we are open for question, and please make sure that you ask any question here. We still have a lot of discussions going on in the chat, I can see, but no specific questions on this. We have another question that came in earlier that was, in the case of industry and working environments, there are also several needs for accessibility in all information and communication systems, both due to personal singularities and digital barriers. Have you developed any specific issues for this business or industry case? And the answer is, I think, no, at least not in these projects. And we have not been working that much with what I suppose is more internal systems. We have touched upon that and done a little bit of auditing and testing and investigations, but we haven't developed anything for that specific, if I understand this correctly, the question. But that's also definitely something that is extremely important, of course, to look at, and unfortunately a little patchy when it comes to the legal requirements. So do we have any more questions? Either people are asleep or it was crystal clear. Do you want to, is anybody publishing a list of which CMS tools are making progress on accessibility? The W3C made one, but it was last updated in 2002. Yeah, well, we haven't done that yet, but maybe some of the other tool makers know if there's something going on there. Does anyone want to jump in on that question?
Let's see here. I can speak for myself, and I can speak for some competitors that I know. Again, to the earlier point, I think making progress is probably actually a good way of describing it, because I think it is easier to see which vendors are putting priority on things versus which vendors are actually compliant, because compliance is a pretty vague term. And then there's also compliance kind of in the legal sense and the technical sense, and then there's compliance in the sense of following the spirit of accessibility practice versus sort of the legal definition, which also relates to kind of changes in WCAG 2 guidelines to WCAG 3 guidelines. But for example, like Adobe does a very good job in kind of documenting their current set of compliance and how it relates to specific features in the product. Does that actually translate to good accessibility? That's debatable. And I think, to the earlier point, there's a lot of open source communities that have very active accessibility communities related to open source. But those tend to be really more at the grassroots level rather than at the vendor level. So again, there's no good sort of roll up as far as compliance, and for all the complex reasons that I just listed. At least that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. So I just wanted to share with Hide from W3C about the question we got in the Q&A. It wasn't me stating that you didn't update since 2002. That was written in the question. So the list, I just shared the list. It's the www.w3.org/way/AU, I think, /2002/tools. So that's the list that was referred to. But Hide said that there will be a list a lot later this year. And I know that there's a lot of work going on when it comes to authoring tools also in W3C. So that's really going to help whenever that is going to be published. So good to have you here also, Hide. You have been following these projects for a long time. So thank you for being with us again. So I don't know if we don't have any more technical questions. This is a real pity because we have a specialist here on really techie things from Optimizely. But in that case, I think we will just move on to the industry panel, because I am sure we have 7 people in the panel, so it will be good to have a little bit more time to let everyone speak. So if we can have the panelists up, and thank you, Per. I'm sorry I couldn't give you any difficult questions this time. I will be back another time with something I can't answer myself, I'm sure. But very good work. Thanks for your contribution to the project. It has been extremely successful. So I look forward to us ruling the world with the new templates. So thank you.
Thank you.
So for the last panel we have today, I have invited all the authoring tools that we have been working together with in the cluster project, and also Tiny MCA, and also Mark Demeny from Optimizely, because we are covering both the cluster and feed projects today. So it's natural to have all of you on board. And really, what I would like to discuss is really how we can move this forward. We have seen that we have done, at least in my view, a little bit of progress here, and we are trying to do good things. And I think we have a common sense that a common understanding that we want to do good things in the future. But this is what I like to discuss with you. How can we make sure that we do this in a good way? And something is stopping Brian from starting his video, so maybe Eva can look into that. I think he should be allowed to start his video. So anyway, the very distinguished panel we have with us today to end this event consists of Mike Gifford, who is representing Drupal here. And thank you for waking up early again this morning. And then we have Timo Stollenberg representing Clone. He's from Kit Concept in Germany. And And we have Carl Eklöf, who is one of the co-founders and head of innovation in SiteVision, so one of the Swedish license tools. We have Brian Tiemann, who is sort of the go-to person for Joomla, one of the founders as well. And we also have Philip Beck Larsen from Umbraco. I hope I haven't seen Philip, but I hope he's here. Joachim Lindqvist, who is a co-founder of Tiny MCE. So very happy to have you on board, and we are so proud to also cover the editor part of the world in our little project. And again, Mark Demeny, who you already seen from Optimizely. So, and Brian has found the video, that's good, but we don't seem to have Umbraco with us yet. Could this be?
Philip is not here, unfortunately, yet. I will email him.
Yeah, so maybe he's just sort of running to the 3:30 time, so it's my fault starting too early. But when we didn't have any questions from the audience, I wanted to make sure that we started the discussion instead. So let's see what the market players are saying about all of this. So you are the ones that will have the biggest impact, I think, when we look at this part of the ecosystem, and you are the ones who also know what is technically and business-wise feasible at all. And as you are representing a vast majority of the authoring tools that, at least according to our research, is represented by public sector or used in public sector bodies in Europe, I think this is an extremely interesting panel to ask about how you see the future. So if I can start with Mike, maybe. What do you see? I mean, do you believe these projects will have a real impact on accessibility, not only in Drupal, but in the whole market? I mean, do you see a demand for built-in accessibility like the ones that we are trying to achieve here? And is there a real business case somewhere from the open source community? What would you say?
I'd say that absolutely this is going to have an impact. I think it already has had an impact. Just bringing together people from these various communities to learn from each other, to share best practices, to be able to point back and forth to each other's projects to say, oh, this is what Joomla is doing, this is what Plume's doing, to find tools and to share resources amongst people who are passionate about accessibility and who have some influence in these other systems. I think that's something that already has had an impact that will carry on beyond this initial stage of this project. It's a big project though, and ultimately it comes down to, is there demand from clients? Are clients asking for these services? And that's out of our control. We can work to meet that demand, but in general, authoring tools are not, there's not much attention paid to authoring tools. Most authoring tools are ugly because the assumption is that all that matters is the final results. What does the user see as opposed to what does the author see? So it's often an underfunded and under-resourced space. And I think that by bringing together groups like this, we're able to go off and say, well, how do we make this process as easy as possible for everyone to adopt best practices and to continue to evolve and to address this underserved and resourced piece of so much of our technological interfaces.
Thank you, and thank you for the ugliness of the authoring tools coming from your side and not from mine. So if we go to the licensed product, Carl, do you think there is a business case for accessibility from your side? I know SiteVision has been working with accessibility also, of course, obviously before this project, but
yes, of course, yeah. SiteVision has been working with a lot of public sector in Sweden for the last 20 years. So we have had a lot of laws and directives that have driven us to focus on accessibility. So a lot of features that we're talking about today is built-in functionality in SiteVision. But I definitely think that this type of projects impact the authoring tools. I mean, the demand, as we see it, is huge. Even from the private sector, we can see now that they are starting to get interested in accessibility, which is relatively new. One thing we have looked at in this project is the focus on helping the author during the process rather than at the end. So instead of telling the author that something is wrong, we try to give live feedback during the process of the authoring process, so that you can we try to make it easy to make things right and make it hard to make things wrong. And that's the whole punchline.
Yeah, that's a direct translation of your payoff, I think. So that's really good. I like that. Yeah. So Philip, welcome on board. I'm sorry it was me starting the panel a bit earlier, so excuse me for that. But we didn't get any questions in the Q&A. So, but now you're here, so that's really good. So I wanted to ask you the same thing from Umbraco's point of view. Do you see a business case for accessibility, or were you just sort of joining this out of curiosity, or what's your take on the business, or the impact that these projects can have on the market?
Yeah, so I think there's two sides to this question, as I'm sure you've talked about already. Like there's the content that the editors produce, where that has more and more requirements, and we see, like, I used to be on the agency side as well, and there's a lot of requirements, especially when we work with government sides, more or less like what Carlo was saying. I think then the other part of it is like how is the editor experience if the editor is somehow disabled or not able to use it, right? So I think that's I think that's one of the areas where Umbraco kind of have invested historically as well a lot. Being an open source project, our investment, if you say so, is a lot of our community that are really passionate about this and has helped us gotten to a pretty good place. And we do see a pretty substantial interest from bigger organizations, especially still in the government space. We work with the EU, and we have like big projects like that where accessibility also for the editors play a big role. So absolutely, I would say for us, even though the investment hasn't too much about dollars, but more about excitement and joy of our community, it's absolutely worth it. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And also just from a humanistic, ethical standpoint, I think it makes a lot of sense to think about both sides of that editing experience from an accessibility point.
Well, that sounds good. So if we go to Germany, this is becoming Eurovision again, but Timo, what's the Plone community looking like? And I know you are not only in Plone, but also in kind of a cluster of open source players. So what's your take on this? Is this a business case for accessibility, or are you just a nice guy?
No, absolutely, it's a business case right from the start. I'm old enough to remember the days when Plone was providing accessibility, and that was a USP for Plone actually, because traditionally Plone was very strong in government sites and like public organization like university and large organizations that required that, like also a long time ago. But it's also an absolutely valid business case, in my opinion, because from an agency point of view, all the contracts that we sign require us to provide accessible websites from the out, of course, not the editing environment so far, but that's a legal requirement and basic requirement in all contracts that we sign, right? So it's not something that's optional. It's just something that you have to provide. And as an agency, you also have to, you need the knowledge in that space, right? To being able to fix accessibility issues and also help clients to provide better accessibility, right? Because it's just, yeah.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the European legislation requires accessibility, but it doesn't require it to be easy for the web authors. That's unfortunately, maybe that should be a requirement, but it isn't. So Brian, from the Joomla experience, I know you are also always been working with accessibility, but do you think like projects like this, do you see a sort of is it positive that we work this way in the community, or how do you would like us to move forward?
Sorry, I'm just echoing some of the things that Mike said at the beginning about when open source communities get to communicate and work together and share experiences, it's got to be for everybody's benefit. I mean, I've been lucky over the last few years to have had a good working relationship with some of the accessibility team within the Drupal community. And together we've actually contributed fixes and suggestions and testing to each other's projects. And that can only be a benefit. I mean, our user base might be different, our technologies might be different, but accessibility is still accessibility. I mean, I can vividly remember sitting in a room at a Drupal sprint and being shown something and going, oh, does that affect us? Realized it didn't, but it affected Bootstrap. And so together we were able to submit a pull request to Bootstrap for them to fix an accessibility issue that was discovered, you know, all the way around. So it's got to be a benefit for everybody.
Yeah. So, so that's kind of the open source hallelujah speech, which is always nice to have. But we also have the licensed products here. So, Mark, from an Optimizely or Episerver standpoint, I mean, do you now, you weren't kind of part of the project, but you have been very, very supportive of the whole issue and really made sure that we could reach out to also to your clients. So I think you already said that accessibility was kind of a business thing, but how do you see projects like this moving things forward and maybe also working together with open source? I mean,
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of facets to that question. I think you know, projects like this definitely move it forward because, you know, we get the benefit of having templates that are more compliant. You know, certainly there is a history of, you know, closed source vendors taking advantage of, you know, open source foundations, you know, be it web servers or, you know, frameworks like, you know, nowadays React and others. So there is a lot of cross-pollination between communities, regardless of, you know, the types of licenses involved in those underlying foundational bits. So that definitely does tend to happen. You know, and then to the part of the question around commercial motivations, you know, there's really two parts to that. And, you know, one of them is, I definitely have a commercial motivation to be, you know, building in accessibility features. You know, for example, the biggest, you know, we have an ideas portal on Episerver. You know, one of the most voted up questions is, you know, upgrading the output from our forms system from, you know, WCAG 2.0 to WCAG 2.1. You know, and so, you know, that's something that people are prioritizing in terms of asking for that feature functionality. And, you know, I, as a product manager, have to prioritize that. And if that gets enough votes, you know, the customer's always right in that respect. And so we're building that. And, you know, that has a high priority for me, primarily because a lot of our customers happen to be based in regions that care a lot about that. And, you know, our clients care a lot about that. Therefore, you know, they ask for that. Therefore, we build that. You know, I can't say that's true for every, you know, every vendor in every market, but it's certainly true for us. You know, I could say, you know, one other thing that I think is worth pointing out, I think just in general trends around accessibility, I think one of the things that really was kind of capturing the attention of content creation tools for a very long time was things like, you know, WYSIWYG editing and, you know, a lot of focus on page construction and the visual layout. I think one of the trends in general in the industry that, you know, hopefully will have a good knock-on effect to accessibility is this trend around, you know, separating content from presentation and, you know, thinking about You'll often hear it referred to as like headless content or multi-channel content. And, that actually, once you start focusing more on the core content and less around the visual layout and presentation of things, from an authoring perspective, that really makes accessibility a lot easier, because you're kind of making that visual side of things less of a focus. And this is happening really for commercial reasons, right? As companies are starting to target, pushing the same content to mobile devices, or, email campaigns or kiosks, or, whatever, you're sort of having to strip down and deprioritize the visual display of things and really focus on that core content, which in turn, I hope, has an uplift on accessibility in general, thinking about core content and making it easier to do things on the output, because you're less focused on visual frilly things and more focused on the content itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we did think that we would sort of stumble over some headless solutions when we did the study on which authoring tools are used in public sector. We didn't find any, more or less. So we like kind of got us back to the basics. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's surprising, given that it seems like a natural fit and a natural progression. It's surprising to see accessibility in headless content creation tools isn't what it should be, because it could be a lot easier.
So I want to go back to the editing part of things, since we have TinyMC here and Joachim on board. So a couple of the panelists have touched upon the sort of the other side of accessibility. So the editing environment being accessible for people with disabilities. So as an editor company, what do you think? Is it worthwhile? I know you have some accessibility items in your tool, and some are kind of add-ons or not in the standard. But what do you think? What do you see? Is there a future also for making it easier for the web authors to access that part of this equation? Do you see a future there, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely kind of two camps there. One is the accessibility of the editor itself, and one is the accessibility of the content that's created. And just to show, I looked at some stats before this in our cloud solution, and in a 1 year period, the number of requests to our accessibility checking tool increased tenfold. So it's really, with the EU directives and all that kind of stuff, it's really been, it's gone from something that you would tack on to something that is required in the last couple of years, I would say. And we kind of had that in mind when we built TinyMC5 as well. One of the major motivations of rebuilding the user interface was to build accessibility and mobile support from the ground up in the user in the UI framework itself that we use, that's custom made for us. So now there are updates around ATAG and WCAG that make it a little hard for editors to follow some of those things, but we try to do the best we can to provide a good experience both for authors with disability, as well as people who wants to check their content against. And it's been interesting in this project to see kind of the cross-contamination between the various open source and commercial projects, thinking about how do you display, especially around the user interface, how do you get people to use accessibility without it being a burden for them? I think that's probably where we spend a lot of time discussing. You know, we don't want to have nagging messages and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of work, a lot of research still to do, I think, on the user interface. And yeah, I think that's probably where the burden lies right now to increase the usage of this as well.
Yeah, making sure that you have all the information you need without sort of cluttering the interface with all sorts of things. That's kind of the balance we all struggle with all the time. So getting back to Umbraco and Philip, what do you see as the next step or the sort of natural future for, I mean, not for the authoring tool environment as such, but when it comes to this little narrow path of accessibility, but what do you envision, what do you dream about, or what do you see as the next steps from your end, from the Danish perspective?
I don't know if it's that Danish, but yeah, I think one of the things that we're working on is like how do we make accessibility easy for developers that extend our platform. So, you know, Umbraco is very, very flexible, and it's super easy to make a new, dashboard or make a new editor that, puts something in your data, whether it's headless or not. But how do we make it so that those extensions are accessible by default? And that's one of the issues that we're tackling in the moment. And I mean, the first part in that is that we're building we're really building a standalone UI library where accessibility is a native component of it. So it's like built with accessibility in mind, which means that anytime you make an extension of Umbraco in any way, if you use our components, you kind of get all of that for free. So that the editing experience can be accessible no matter so it's not an afterthought. It's not something you find in that test in your browser afterwards, but it's actually something that you get out of the box for free when you use Umbraco the way it's supposed to be used. So I think that's probably the thing that's on our radar. At least that's the first thing.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because it's kind of the same idea that we have in this project, but still it's from another perspective. So the supplier side, which is of course the other problem makers here, not only the web authors can make mistakes, but also the suppliers. So Timo, from Plone's point of view, what's the new, can you reveal any secrets about the future for us, or anything that you see or dream about? Maybe just some accessibility issues you would like to see solved in the near.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Philip made a very valid point that I think will be even more important in the future, because my feeling in the CMS market is that they all go towards like headless solutions and decoupling the front end from the back end, that we have like modern front ends with React and Angular. And then it becomes even more important that those new building blocks that we all build upon, right? Because everybody in the web communities is moving towards JavaScript, that those building blocks are accessible by default, right? And there's lots of work that goes into those libraries, right? Into React Router, for instance, right? To make that accessible with Reach Router and everything that came with that. So that's absolutely essential. That like basically we attack the problem from multiple angles, right? And that not only web authors are aware of that, but also like CMS vendors and the people that built the building blocks, right? So this is one very important thing. And the next big step would be then, in my opinion, to make the editing environment accessible as well, right? Because that's the natural next step, of course. If we reach the point where all the CMSs ideally like provide a good accessibility out of the box, then the next step is naturally to allow the editors as well to have an accessible editing environment, right? To allow people to participate in also creating content, because that was the core idea of a CMS, right? To remove the bottleneck of this like administrator person and allow everybody in the organization to participate. And that means that a system is accessible also the editing environment.
And when we go into that project, we need to get all these sort of the others on board as well, not the CMS vendors, but the other kind of authoring tools as well, because that's at least as important. So Brian, from the Joomla perspective, what does the future look like? You're sitting in your very futuristic backdrop, so I think you must be the future.
So, of course, Joomla's the future.
Sorry.
You set me up for that one. I think it's really interesting hearing everybody's different things, because we're all trying to solve the same problem. We're all trying to build a CMS that is accessible to use and produces accessible content, and is also accessible to extend. And I've started to use a phrase in the Joomla world about responsible web design as opposed to responsive. So it's putting people first rather than devices first. And it's a change of mindset. But if you think back 5 years ago, when responsive design came in, that suddenly swept everything, and everybody's efforts, both from the CMS vendor and the CMS suppliers and designers, and the whole ecosphere, everything went about mobile first, device first. And I really want to see us pushing towards people first. And a lot of us are sort of doing that already. And it's not about an accessible alternative that we're offering. We're talking about it just is accessible. Drupal is accessible. Umbraco, Clone, it's accessible. That's what we're talking about. Not, oh, if you do this on top, you convert Umbraco into an accessible product, which was always the way it was before. And I think in the last couple of years, we've seen that shift to it's just accessible. And it's not about writing the code and then testing it later and going, oh, oops, it's not accessible, because everybody's mind shift has changed. And just the right way to write code for the CMS is to write accessible code. Just as you write secure code, you write accessible code. It's just the de facto. So I think that's really, I think we've started that process. And I think that's really going to be the next few years of ongoing.
And that is what you think is going to happen, or what you hope is going to happen?
I'm confident it's going to happen.
Oh,
because it's already started.
That makes me really happy. So yeah, that sounds good. So Mike, what do you say? What's the future from your end?
I see accessibility as a journey, and I don't think that we will ever have an accessible CMS in some ways, in terms of it is accessible, because the definitions are going to keep trying to keep up with the internet. When I first started being involved in Drupal accessibility back in 2008, I thought I'd be able to fix it. Just a couple of changes here and there, and poof, we'd have an accessible CMS. Now we've got probably over 100 accessibility issues that are known and working on, amongst other issues. And so it's trying to embrace that journey, trying to embrace that element of how do we make this a priority, not just for our community, but for our clients, so that there's the ability that accessibility isn't something that we're expected to do for free. This is something that people are willing to pay for, because it takes time and effort to do it right. And those organizations that invest in taking that time to do it right need to be compensated in this capitalist system. We need to find some way to allow those people who are making this a priority are given a better share of the contracts, because there's providing a competitive advantage. There should be one, and right now there isn't. I think there's a lot of hope for these kinds of systems, and in terms of the future. I see the ability for the Web Accessibility Directive and the monitoring that's being there. I think that will really change the scene if we're able to have that competition between organizations, and also collaboration as well, to see that opportunity for organizations like governments to be able to say, this is what our best practice is, this is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to work with, and how we're working with our staff and our vendors to make this happen, to push it out into the open so that everyone can learn from it. There's so much opportunity here, but we, I think monitoring is going to be an important piece of that, but also building it in so that we're able to actually make, so that authors are able to see the impacts right away, so that they're not having to wait for a month or two to get the results. Accessibility needs to be just like spell check and grammar check. It needs to be built in so that people see the results when they're editing it, and that they can learn from that experience in real time. And until we get to that point that it's built into our tools, then accessibility is always going to be frustrating. And if you can imagine a time when, back in the 90s, in the dark ages, when we actually had to run the spell checker as an active process, as opposed to having it running in the background, you don't have to enable spell check by default. It's just there. And why is it that we don't have this built into our Office tools now? Like, nobody is setting up accessibility checking by default as part of the CMS yet. And hopefully we're going to start to see tools starting to do that, so that we can have those live results given to authors, to give them the support they need to learn and to grow and to create content that is accessible over time. But yeah, some thoughts.
Yeah, that was a very kind of short answer to the question. But so Joachim, from Tiny's perspective, can you share anything or any dreams or thoughts of what your how the future looks for from the editor point of view? The next steps for accessibility, what do you think?
Well, I think for checking the content and stuff like that, I think that's keeping up with the changes in the recent specifications, making sure covering as much of that as possible. I think that's going to be pretty important. So we tend to do an accessibility audit both of the content and of the editor about once a year in general. We do some continuous stuff as well, of course, making sure with tests we won't break things, but in general, we try to do an audit about once a year of the editor and the content itself to make sure we have everything up to date. There hasn't been so much change. I think it's just the last couple of years there's been some changes. So the next step for us is probably to get an update out, which touches on some of this, both for the editor content and the editor itself. Making sure as we innovate the user interface, for example, with various features, we need to make sure they maintain accessible as well. So there's a lot of innovation and thinking and kind of wild things going on with the user interface. And to some extent, the accessibility puts a little bit of a brake on that because you can't do just about anything. But within HTML, there's usually ways to solve that. It's just a little trickier. So that's certainly one of our main tasks as we do audits and updates, especially to the user interface coming up. So just
out of curiosity, if you can answer kind of short, since you are sort of everywhere and really have a global impact with your product, is the European directives and the European legislation, is that something kind of high on your agenda, or is it more of a global perspective? Because now Europe is kind of pushing for or leading the way in when it comes to standards and things like that. So how does that affect a company like Tiny?
Yeah, I mean, our main market is definitely the US still, but EU is huge, and the US is watching everything that's happening in the EU, and I think the directives coming out of EU, they tend to kind of take those aboard quite quickly in the US because a lot of the CMSs here as well, we don't know borders really. There's nothing like that. We deliver to all around the world. So it's very much spreading way beyond the EU, and we're seeing that in daily calls. So definitely.
Okay, so we need to move on a little bit quickly here because we have a hard stop at 4 because our captionist is going somewhere else. So I would just like all of you to reflect really quickly about what we can do as a community as a whole, because we have been very, very happy about this project with the market leading people going together, doing things together. And I'm also, I should have said that this may not be my most gender balanced panel I've ever had in my life, but such is life sometimes. But moving forward, I mean, I really like the idea of competitors working together and also the mix of open source and licensed. So I don't know if, I mean, this is kind of my take on this. We would like to do something similar or keep going or sort of building the cluster, having more people on board and so on. But maybe that's not the right way. And I don't want to sort of steer you in one direction. But what I think it seems like all of you, we're very eager to make this happen. So how can we, what is the single best way in 20 seconds to make sure that the authoring tool community is making things better? Mark, if you want to start, and I will shut you off when you're too long.
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the biggest things and the simplest things is legislation. I mean, you look at GDPR and how much that's changed, how vendors and platforms think about privacy. The same is true for accessibility. I hate to throw the big hammer at it, but I think that's probably what's necessary for, you know, pretty big structural change. Okay, thank you. Legal, that's a boring answer, but thank you. And it's very good. And Carl, Sight Vision from the other licensed partner here, do you also see legislation as the big?
Maybe, but we can see that requests for GDPR and so on is driving, and of course, our development of our product. But I think we, as the other partners here, use a lot of open source, and we can collaborate around that, even though we are a licensed product. So I think cooperation is the key. We all have the same goal. That's accessibility for everyone. I mean, simple as that.
Yeah, okay. Philip, Umbraco, you seem to be a sort of an open community, but how do you think we could move forward together, or what would be the best way?
I really liked what I think Brian or Mike said about, you know, accessibility is just how we do things, and it needs to be that way. Whereas when there's when we discover an accessibility issue, it just doesn't go on the backlog of never happening, but it actually, we treat it as a regression and prioritize it highly to get it fixed, just as if it was a security issue or performance regression or something like that. We need to deal with it in a similar way. Yeah, and I think we as a community need to do that.
Yeah, and hopefully we do. So I hope that will come through. So Joachim from Tiny, what do you think is what will drive this forward from your end?
Well, from Tiny's perspective, as we serve a lot of CMSs and companies out there, for us, it's communication. We need to talk to you guys, that's talking to the end users, to make sure that we're covering all the bases. And I think that's also what this project is a little bit about. So that's what I think. So communication and collaboration, I think is good.
Communication and collaboration, that sounds
legal
good.
And legislation is really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So Brian, what do you think? How do we move forward in the best way possible?
Money.
Money?
No, yeah, no, seriously, it's not about, I'm not saying pay us to make the products accessible. I'm talking about funders like the EU making money available for people like ourselves to get together physically. Yeah, hopefully post-COVID conferences will start to happen again. But I think for most of us, when we attend conferences, we're expected to be talking about accessibility to others. And wouldn't it be a great opportunity if we can all sit around the table at a sprint or a conference where we're just sharing and learning from each other at a different level. And that, I think, would be what drives it forward. And of course, and the money part is, well, it needs money to make those sort of things happen.
Yeah, good. So now we have a long list of requirements that need to be fulfilled for us to move forward. Timo, what's your contribution to this? You are muted, I think.
that's super hard because I'm at the end. So I mean, legislation and is definitely important to drive things forward, and also tenders, right? So if there's a public tender and this is real, accessibility is really part of the tender, that also helps to drive that. Cooperation, that was also already said, right? Cooperation between open source vendors, commercial vendors, providers of libraries on all levels, editors and groups. I really enjoy working in the cluster with all different people, right, and cooperate on those things. So yeah, those were like the two main things, I'd say, to be brief.
Okay, good. So Mike, you will have the most difficult part because you are now closing this by something very brilliant. So what's the kind of end take of this?
Well, Brian definitely stole my idea. So I'd like to go off and give him credit first of all, but just to go beyond that, the second idea I had is just, especially when you're dealing with open source tools, government can be involved, not just to purchase the tools, but to contribute back to them. There's really no reason that all of the thousands of accessibility experts in government or who work for government cannot be contributing back to these projects and finding ways to make them better. Government can be a leader to share first and make it easier for everyone else to go off and to contribute and to follow that example. So whether that's in I mean, yeah, certainly with open source tools, that's an easy way to do that. And there's no contractual issues around that. But even still, there's not a lot of momentum for government to find ways to contribute back and improve the tools so that accessibility is easier, not just for that department site that's being built, but for every government and every citizen around the world that's trying to use that tool in order to go off and build an accessible site or accessible content. So I think that would be the other piece, is just to, again, call out to government to be a real leader in this space and both contribute as a contributor technically, but also as a financial contributor, to help make sure that this is resourced properly, and not to expect that accessibility is just going to be dealt with for free. This is something that takes a real expertise and real time and effort to implement. So it should be compensated, and that needs to be part of every sort of contract that government puts forward around digital infrastructure.
Yeah, really. And I couldn't agree more on the sort of principle of accessibility needing to be to have a cost attached to it. So the end users need to be paid when they provide their expertise. And if we don't value accessibility, then it won't happen. So I absolutely agree with the money part. So it seems like we are going to continue working in the cluster, having more people on board, getting more money. We are obviously doing something in Sweden next summer. That's really nice. Welcome, everyone. And also somebody's going to pay for it, which is really good. And we will have the legal baseline for whatever we do to guide us in the right direction. And now we also need the public sector on board. So this will be, I don't know, at least we can't be in my house next summer because this will be a really big crowd, but let's not make that stop us. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending today. And my lovely panelists, you are so talkative that we could have been continuing this forever, but very, very good things here covered. And I hope that we will meet again soon. And we will, of course, continue working together in the projects. They are ending in July, so stay tuned for the latest updates. And I also want to mention to you that we have a Global Accessibility Awareness Day event tomorrow, a GAD special on emerging tech. One of my lovely colleagues, Emil, is going to tell you everything about XR, VR, and all the other fancy acronyms around that. So thank you very much for being with us today, and have a very good rest of your day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.